I'm not sure why, but it seems like most people are on this side this week. So I have to start looking at this side more or that side. I'm not sure where to look today. My first cousin, Eric, who lives in New York, has been having a very hard week, not only because of the pandemic that hurt his business, but because one of his classmates from high school, named Joseph Borgen, was beat up on the streets of New York, Midtown, for wearing a kippah by Palestinian activists. The attack was captured on video. Here's the photo from the New York Post. He's wearing a collar and has had a concussion. Following another pro-Palestinian rally in Los Angeles, 10 thugs, let's call them what they are, thugs, rolled up to a kosher sushi restaurant in Beverly Hills. You can watch the video of that attack online as well, as attackers pick up metal barriers and swing them at innocent, frightened people having dinner. As a rabbi, you know that from this bima, I have done my best to try to address all sides in this conflict. I am sympathetic to the Palestinians living in Gaza and in the West Bank for this reason and this reason only. It is no crime to be born in Gaza and to want a better life for your family. We all want that for our families. Only here's what I have not seen this past week. I have not seen one American Jewish activist beating up a Palestinian on the streets of New York, or attacking one after a rally or having dinner. I have not seen one of these Free Palestine organizations come forward this week to condemn violence against Jews in America. What I have seen is an 80% increase in anti-Semitic incidents across the United States, along with what the Anti-Defamation League is saying are 17,000 Twitter posts with variations on the expression, Hitler was right. Here is what I have also seen this week and this past month. Hypocritical politicians and Hollywood movie stars who defend the killing of Jews in Israel and then have the chutzpah to post the next week saying that anti-Semitism is bad, making me believe, or leading me to believe at least, that they are quote-unquote out of their lane on this issue, or at worst, unwitting perpetrators of anti-Semitism themselves. Here's what I also see. I see Palestinian activists playing the victim card, for decades holding protests on college campuses, crying out for safe spaces, who then this week chose deliberately Jewish neighborhoods across the US and Canada, towns like Teaneck, New Jersey, where they held rallies in the town square with no other objective but to intimidate those Jewish communities. And make no mistake, these hooligans committing hate crimes in America against Jews are no better than the Hamas terrorists shooting rockets and killing Israelis. Is it any wonder? We have to ask ourselves this Shabbat. Is it any wonder that the 2020 Pew Report on American Jewish Life this last week reported that 75% of Jews across our country view there being more anti-Semitism now than there was 5 years ago? Is it any wonder that half of Jews in those surveys said they feel less safe living in America than they did 5 years ago? Is it any wonder that 1 out of 10 Jews hesitates to come to a Jewish event or a Jewish function, whether that is synagogue or a fundraiser or anything else, because they fear for their own safety. And that survey was taken before the events of the past several weeks. To add insult to injury, in a story you may have missed, this past week, the Georgia courts ruled that the anti-BDS law, courageously signed by Governor Deal, a law that helped us to feel safe in this state by letting us know that our tax dollars would not go to organizations that threaten Israel, that law was ruled unconstitutional. Go on the web, you will see anti-Israel organizations across our country heralding that decision. My friends, it is simply dumbfounding how quickly the world has turned on its head the past several weeks. It is a stark reminder to us that the fight for Jewish lives and the struggle for Israel has never been a fair fight. Not because, as the Palestinians have been claiming, Israel has this missile defense technology and it's just not fair, but because, as Cynthia Ozick once wrote, there is no people in the world who have had the morally and politically diseased phrase, right to exist, attached to their very existence, other than the Jews. She wrote that in 1994, 25 years ago, and look how little has changed. Today, we as American Jews are being targeted, and we will always be targeted because we have Israel's back. Only as the world continues to rally around those who would attack Jews in Israel and abroad, and as attention is paid to body counts rather than bodies saved, we also understand why the fight is not fair. As Jews, we prize life above all else. But if you don't believe that Israel or Jews have a right to exist, then who cares if you shoot innocent rockets or beat up civilians on the streets? Our lives have little value. I didn't want to give this sermon this week. Only this past week, I connected with several people in our community, some of them as young as high school, who are having nightmares about their own safety because what they are seeing on the news. And so now I want to shift gears. I want to talk a little bit about our parasha, and I want to tell you what I told them. First, I want to assure you that despite everything I've just said, that we Jews live in a wonderful country where we are admired and respected. That's what I told those folks having nightmares as well. In 2014, there was another Pew survey that went out that asked the question to all Americans, to which religious group do you feel the warmest? Would you be surprised to find out the answer was the Jews? More than Catholics? More than Protestants? Jews. 64 out of 100. This past week, with thanks to Danny Oren, who's sitting here this morning, I also participated in a wonderful interfaith baccalaureate service at Sprayberry High School. Members of all faiths, clergy, Christian, Muslims, Hindus, Jews, we all blessed the students of the fourth most diverse high school in the state of Georgia as they go out into the world. In America, this is what is possible when we put aside our differences to work together. But sadly, I also want to tell you what I told these other folks this past week, which is that we cannot hide from the fact we are living in a country where, because of perceived success of the Jewish people, there is a hatred of Jews. We're also living in a time where our social media culture magnifies the most outrageous voices in this conflict. And we pay attention to those voices in replacement of reliable, truthful, journalist-driven media and reporting. Feelings over the facts. And yet, as we look at this week's parasha, Beha'alotcha, we see how Judaism sends us an important, powerful message. How important it is as we, as Jews, must go into the world and teach the truth and promote the truth from those loud, gadfly voices that would seize it from us in this time of challenge. In our parashah this week, we see two stories that are literally right next to one another that speak to our important role as Jews, as truth tellers to the world. In our first story, a group of Israelites complain there's not enough meat to eat in the desert. They tell everybody that they don't like the manna. Hitavu ta'ava, the Torah teaches us, they had a gluttonous craving. And so what do? They lie and they exaggerate. They talk about how great life was in Egypt because the food on the cruise was especially fabulous. They lead with their feelings instead of the facts. Slavery in Egypt, better than God-given food falling from heaven? Food that the Midrash teaches us was so delicious, it could taste like anything we wanted it to. God gets absolutely furious. And eventually God honors their requests, so much so that we're told the meat comes out of their eyeballs. It's a brilliant metaphor if you think about it, isn't it? You may whine and complain loud enough and stretch the truth and live your life with blinders, but eventually you throw up out of your eyes. In the end, God can see the truth that you yourself deny. Contrast that with the second story I spoke about earlier, the brilliant prophets Eldad and Medad, two of Moses' students who begin to prophesy in the camp. These guys are novices at best. Joshua is concerned about the danger of the truth they are spouting. Maybe the truth will harm Moses' credibility as leader of the Jewish people. Klaim, he yells to Moses, stifle them. Only Moses takes a different tack. He welcomes the truth. Moses embraces the truth. Because in contrast, the lies and the exaggeration in our first story, these two are armed with the words of God. And Moses knows that whether the truth comes from him or from anything else, that truth must be prized above all. Folks, this Shabbat, I want to conclude by sharing with you some words of truth. First, the struggle over anti-Semitism, the struggle for Israel has not, nor will it ever be, a fair fight. It wasn't in the Middle Ages when they were sprouting blood libels about us. It wasn't true when the state of Israel first got started, not in 1948 and not today. The events of this past week remind us that as admired as Jews are in America, there are still people around, and they are very loud voices who believe we do not have the right to exist. That should shake us out of our complacency. These people are named Hamas, they are gadflies on social media, and they are peripheral Jews who are sadly ignorant of their own history. And they are hooligans attacking innocent Jews on the streets. And so our responsibility as Jews, our weapon must be the same as it has been throughout our history. We must be Eldad and Medad. We must arm ourselves and be prophets with the truth and make sure that truth gets spread to the world. Here's another such truth that we also know. Israel is not a perfect country. We Jews are not a perfect people. But when a mob gathers on the streets of New York, or 3,000 plus missiles are pointed at our heads, we're going to act to defend ourselves. We're not going to make apologies for that. And if civilians in Gaza die, innocent civilians, which is a tragedy, because Hamas places its military targets among civilians, their deaths are tragic, but the fault for that lies with Hamas. It does not lie with Israel. That is the truth. Here's another truth. The Palestinians do not have a state in 2021, not because Israel has not come to the table. It's because they have erroneously always believed they are entitled to everything as the world has left them behind. Some of you may remember the famous story about Yasser Arafat in the year 2000 at Camp David, when Ehud Barak practically gave away the store. 95% of what the Palestinians wanted, a capital in Jerusalem. And Arafat chose to walk away without a peace deal. He was told at that moment, the story goes, to have said to President Clinton, you are a great man. Do you know what President Clinton said? No, I am a colossal failure and you made me one. You made me one. Well, is it any wonder that after 20 years of incompetent leadership, that the Palestinians have lost the confidence of the American government? Friends, as Jews, we are armed with a truth that the world would love to forget. Because like Eldad and Medad, this truth makes us dangerous. It's not a truth that makes us popular with our friends at dinner parties and, yes, at some political gatherings. It's a truth that hooligans have been trying to bury with metal barriers on the streets of Los Angeles and by beating up my cousin's classmate in the streets of New York. But it's a truth that we must continue to tell. They may yell Klaim, stifle those Jews, but we must yell it from the rooftops. As Jews, we will prevail as we always have against this scourge of hate. We will prevail because the Jewish people, even in a world of false truths and lies, are armed with the truth. We will prevail because we have a right to exist, whether it is in America as in Israel. And guess what, friends? So do the Palestinians, once they learn to tell the truth and to not overlook its inconvenience when they choose to look at what the truth really is. Friends, it's been a hard week, but with your help and the truth, the Jewish people will prevail. We will have better days ahead on the streets of New York, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and Jerusalem.